This story took place in December of 2017 on my boyfriend's farm just outside a small town in Nebraska. I was 16 years old at the time, and I still remember every second of what happened. It's one of those memories that doesn't fade with time, it clings to you. The fear, the cold, the sound, it's all been burned into my mind. The whole experience ultimately ruined both Christmas and New Year's for me. I spent the holidays trapped in a fog of paranoia and anxiety. It all happened on a bitterly cold night, specifically December 21st. I remember that detail clearly because I had just gotten out of school for winter break. My boyfriend, Jacob, had invited a few of us over to hang out. Our group included me, Jacob, and our friends Lucy, Ryan, and Hunter. Jacob lived on a large, rural property surrounded by woods. His closest neighbors were several miles away, so the area was isolated and quiet, almost too quiet. That night, Jacob was especially excited. His parents had surprised him with an early Christmas present, a brand new 6-seater UTV. Naturally, we were all dying to take it for a ride. Around 10 p.m., we bundled up and climbed into the UTV. Jacob took the wheel. I sat beside him in the middle with Hunter on my other side. Lucy and her boyfriend Ryan sat in the back, clearly hoping for some alone time. Jacob steered us down a bumpy dirt road that led into the woods. The moment we left the open land and entered the thick forest, I felt my chest tighten. I suffer from anxiety, and being deep in the woods at night, no less, triggered something in me. I hated the idea of being out there with no cell service, no way to call for help. The temperature outside was around 25 degrees, and since the UTV didn't have a windshield, the wind blasted us as we drove. At 40 miles per hour, it felt like knives cutting into our skin. After a few minutes, my legs began to go numb from the cold. I told Jacob to stop so I could switch seats with Ryan. I wanted to sit in the back and warm up a little, and I figured it'd be a good chance to chat with Lucy. Ryan and I climbed out of the UTV and were just starting to switch spots when it happened. We heard a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a screech, somewhere between a woman screaming and a pig squealing. High-pitched, violent, and inhuman. Lucy and I froze. Our eyes met, and I could see in her face that she was just as terrified as I was. The guys tried to play it off, saying it was probably an animal or maybe just our imaginations. They tried to calm us down, to be rational. But I wasn't having it. I didn't care what it was. I wanted out of those woods immediately. We tried to shake it off and get back into the UTV. But when Jacob turned the key, nothing happened. The engine wouldn't start. It made no sense. He'd just gotten the vehicle a week ago. It was practically brand new, and he'd only driven it a couple of times. Now it was dead in the middle of the forest. Panic set in. I didn't want to be there anymore. None of this felt right, but it was happening. It was real. Jacob suggested splitting up. Someone had to go back to the house to get his truck, and we couldn't just leave the UTV sitting there unattended. So we made a plan. Jacob, Hunter, and I would walk back to the house and get the truck. Lucy and Ryan would stay behind and keep watch over the UTV. I didn't love the idea of leaving them alone, but there wasn't much choice. The three of us set off, walking down the dark dirt road toward Jacob's house. It was about a mile away, maybe a little more. I was exhausted and still shaking from fear. I couldn't stop thinking about that awful sound. It kept playing in my head like a broken record. Jacob tried to keep a conversation going, probably to distract me. He knew I was scared. And then, people say I'm easy to read, and they're not wrong. Whether I'm mad, sad, or scared, it's written all over my face. So, it didn't take long for Jacob and Hunter to notice something was off with me. Jacob was about to ask what was wrong. But before he could speak, Hunter raised his finger to his lips and motioned for him to stay quiet. Hunter's the smallest one in our group, but what he lacks in size, he makes up for in intensity. He's one of those people who can silence a room with a single look. We stopped walking and just listened. At first, all we could hear was the crunch of our boots settling into the dirt and the distant rustle of wind through the trees. But then, just as I was about to whisper something, we heard it again, that same unholy scream. It echoed through the woods like it came from every direction at once. Sharp, guttural, and not of this world. I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run, to drop everything and just bolt into the night. I could feel my legs trembling beneath me. Jacob quickly grabbed my arm and said, "Babe, it's just a coyote." Come on, we're almost there. But I knew he didn't believe that. None of us did. I wasn't buying the excuse either. I was completely done with this whole situation. Every horror story I'd ever read was flashing through my mind: skinwalkers, dogmen, shapeshifters, you name it. It all felt terrifyingly possible in that moment. And then, Hunter grabbed me. He didn't say a word, he just yanked my arm and pointed his flashlight straight ahead into the trees. That's when I saw it. And it's something I will never ever forget. It stood at least 7 feet tall, with skin that looked bleached and ghost white. Its eyes were huge, glowing yellow, and cat-like. But it wasn't just the eyes, it was the way it stared. The kind of stare that crawls into your bones and refuses to leave. Its mouth stretched open into a crooked, chilling grin, jagged rows of razor-sharp teeth lining the inside. And yet, I couldn't look away. I felt pulled toward it, like its eyes were speaking to me, calling to me. Something about it felt persuasive. Like it wanted me to come closer. And a part of me almost did. I was about to take a step forward when Jacob yanked me back. He didn't waste a second, he grabbed my hand and took off running, with Hunter right behind him. We ran. We didn't look back. Branches whipped at our faces. My breath felt like ice in my lungs. But we didn't stop until we were back at the UTV. Ryan and Lucy were still in the back, completely oblivious to what was going on. They were in the middle of their own moment when we crashed in, breathless and wild-eyed. Jacob jumped into the driver's seat and tried to start it again, but nothing. He was crying now. I had never seen him like that before. Then we heard it again. That screech? This time, it sounded even closer, louder, and more vicious. That was it for me. I broke down completely, sobbing in the back seat, and Lucy clutched onto me, just as shaken. Ryan kept asking what was happening. He had no idea what we had just seen. Then, by some miracle, the UTV roared to life. Jacob didn't wait. He slammed it into gear and sped off down the dirt road, going as fast as he could. That awful scream followed us, growing distant as we left it behind. When we reached the house, we didn't even park properly. We jumped out and sprinted for the front door. We slammed it shut behind us and locked every deadbolt. Jacob's dad was standing in the kitchen, confused and alarmed by our sudden arrival. We practically shouted the story at him, each of us talking over the other, shaking and trying to make sense of what had just happened. He tried to calm us down, said maybe it was just a sick bear or a wolf with mange. But none of us were having it. That wasn't a bear. That wasn't a wolf. That thing wasn't natural. None of us wanted to go home after that. There was no way we were stepping back outside, not even to walk to our cars. So we all called our parents and told them we were staying the night. We camped out in the living room. Me on the couch, Lucy curled up in the recliner, and the boys scattered on the floor. Even then, I could have sworn I heard the screaming again, faint, in the distance. But I can't be sure. That was the only time I ever saw that thing. Its yellow eyes still haunt me in dreams sometimes, but I never encountered it again in real life. Jacob and I live together now. His dad still owns the farm, but I refuse to go out there unless it's during the day. And even then, I won't ever go near that dirt road again. I'm 23 now, and this all happened back in high school just before college started. But the fear never really goes away. My best friend from back home, let's call her Jenny, has always had strange experiences too. It's like she's a magnet for the paranormal. Both of us have been through some seriously creepy stuff over the years. But this story? This is one I don't mind telling. Because it wasn't just me. Other people were there. Other people saw it. Felt it. It's one of the only times in my life that I've been truly terrified, but at least I wasn't alone. And I know I'm not crazy. Liz never really preoccupied herself with anything paranormal. In fact, she didn't like to talk about that stuff at all. Jenny and I, on the other hand, were more open about it. We were neighbors and spent a lot of time together. Liz lived about 20 minutes away in a different town. So, on most nights, Jenny and I would hang out at one of our houses and Liz would sleep over at Jenny's while I just went home. Being the only guy in the group, that's just how it usually worked. Liz's hometown was an old farming community tucked between our suburban area and Philadelphia. It was quiet, rural, and wrapped along a river with wide fields, a handful of outbuildings, and very few residents. Normally, we didn't spend a lot of time at Liz's house. Jenny rarely slept over there. And at the time, I didn't think much of it. Later, I realized there was a reason for that. Anyway, one day during winter break, we made plans to take a day trip to New York City. Since Liz's dad worked near the city, the plan was to catch a ride with him in the morning and take a train the rest of the way. So we all agreed to sleep over at Liz's place the night before. It seemed easier that way. That night, Jenny and Liz went upstairs to sleep in Liz's room while I took the couch in the living room downstairs. Liz's house was old. Creaky. The The kind of house that feels like it remembers everything that ever happened inside it. It had history, and I couldn't help but feel uneasy as the lights went out and everyone settled in. The Christmas tree was still up and glowing faintly. I left it on to use as a night light, but beyond that small warm glow, the house was wrapped in heavy darkness. Sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up. I didn't know why at first, but something just felt wrong. That's the only way I can put it. It wasn't like I sensed danger exactly. It was more like a cold dread washing over me, like I was a kid again staring into a Halloween mask. I knew I wasn't in danger, but I still couldn't move. And then I heard it. The stairs. They creaked softly, like someone or something was slowly walking down them, step by step. The couch I was laying on had its back to the staircase. That meant whatever was coming down the stairs was directly behind me. I didn't want to look. I didn't dare move. I yanked the blanket up over my feet and pulled it over my head, shutting my eyes tight like a little kid. Somehow, deep down, I just knew it wasn't one of my friends, and it definitely wasn't one of their parents. The creaking continued steady, unchanging. Whoever or whatever was walking down the stairs didn't weigh much. I could tell that just from the sound. Light, but deliberate. Then it reached the bottom. I heard it pause, and then the sound changed. Now it was walking across the hardwood floor, the clacking of long nails clicking rhythmically as it approached. It sounded just like a large dog with claws. The steps turned toward me, passing behind the couch and then toward the kitchen. I couldn't take it anymore. I peeked just a quick glance over the edge of the couch out toward the kitchen, and for a split second I saw it. It was just passing out of sight behind the kitchen wall, but that brief glimpse is burned into my memory forever. It probably sounds cartoonish when I try to describe it, but in that moment, it was pure nightmare fuel. It stood around 7 feet tall, with long, bone-thin legs and weirdly knobby knees. Its feet looked like something between a bald eagle's claws and skeletal talons. Its arms were human-shaped, but they ended not in hands, but in long, stiff feathers. Its upper body had scattered patches of thin, wispy feathers, while the rest of its skin looked like an overcooked chicken, wrinkled, slick, and pale. Its head was like a freshly hatched bird, wet-looking raw, but its beak was enormous. At least 3 times the size of its head, thin and curved downward like a scythe. It walked upright with an almost regal posture. Shoulders back, spine straight, head held high. Its eyes were huge, triangular, and reminded me of the Pokemon Zapdos. Except these eyes weren't cartoony. They were sharp, unblinking, and deeply unsettling. I ducked my head back under the blanket instantly. And I didn't move. Not an inch. I don't know how long I stayed like that, maybe minutes, maybe hours. But for a long time, I just lay there frozen. I could hear it walking through the dining room, into the living room, and then it just stopped. Right in front of the couch I was lying on. I didn't dare move. I didn't breathe. I just kept my eyes shut tight under that blanket. It stood there for what felt like minutes. Like it was watching me. Hovering. Eventually, I cracked my eyes open. The thick fuzzy blanket cast everything in a soft blue haze, but I could still make out the shape. Its shadow, tall and unnatural, loomed in front of the Christmas tree lights. I saw it. Clear as day. And then, just as suddenly, it turned to the right and began walking slowly back up the stairs. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just lay there, wide awake, waiting for the sun to rise. Eventually, it did. Once the daylight filled the house and my friends were up, everything felt different, almost normal. The fear faded like a bad dream. For a while, I convinced myself that's all it had been. A dream. Later that day, when Liz was out of earshot, Jenny asked me almost too casually how I had slept. I told her fine, thinking maybe she sensed something was off. But I didn't tell her what I saw. Not yet. It wasn't until a few weeks later that Jenny brought it up again. We were talking, and out of nowhere, she said, "I don't like sleeping at Liz's house, it's haunted." My heart dropped. I asked her what she meant, and she went on to tell me that she always felt weird in Liz's room. Unsettled. Then she added something else, something about a photo. Naturally, I pushed her to show me. She explained that someone had once taken a photo of her and Liz sitting on the bed in Liz's room. Just a normal selfie, arms interlocked, throwing up peace signs like teens did in the 2010s. They sent it to someone on Snapchat. And that's when it got weird. The person who received the photo screenshotted it and replied, "What's that behind you?" In the daylight right between Jenny and Liz's arms was a face. A bird-shaped face with sharp, angry triangular eyes. It wasn't transparent or ghostly. It was just there, clear as day, like it was part of the picture. But the edges of its face seemed to blur and melt into the normal background, like it was phasing in from somewhere else. Jenny and the person who took the photo were both freaked out. Liz was unnerved but brushed it off. She told Jenny to delete the photo and not talk about it again. But Jenny didn't delete it. She kept it and showed it to me. I asked her why it would be a bird, of all things. She said she had a theory, but I don't think she ever gave me a full explanation. I never told the girls what I saw that night. I still haven't. And honestly, I don't really want to post the photo online. Both Jenny and Liz are in it, and I don't want to betray their privacy. I think I had a copy of the picture once, a few phones ago. But I'm not sure I still have it. Maybe one day I'll ask Jenny to send it to me again, but I'd have to be careful. I don't want her to get mad at me for bringing it back up. My mom woke up in the middle of the night to Maggie growling. Maggie was our family dog, a sweet, calm farm dog who rarely barked or acted up. So, when my mom heard her growl, it immediately caught her attention. She's a pretty light sleeper anyway, but this was unusual behavior, even for her. At first, my mom thought it was probably an animal outside. Coyotes or big bucks wandering near the farm sometimes upset Maggie, so that was the most likely explanation. But that night, it wasn't. Our farm sits right next to a highway, and there's a long, unlit lane that leads into our yard. At first, it was hard to see anything, but then my mom noticed a dark vehicle creeping slowly down that lane. The car's headlights were off. There wasn't much light in the yard, and that's when my mom's stomach sank. Anyone with good intentions wouldn't be driving without headlights on, especially at night. She had 2 little kids in the house to protect. The vehicle rolled slowly into the yard. My mom couldn't tell exactly how many people were inside, but at least 2 men got out and started heading toward the shop where my dad kept his tools and tractor. There was a big power panel on the side of the shop. It controlled the electricity for the yard and the house. The men opened that panel and began fiddling with it, trying to figure out how to shut off the power. What their intentions were, my mom still doesn't know. Luckily, my family had a hunting rifle. My mom grew up on a farm, so she knew how to use it. With the rifle in hand, she quietly propped open the door just enough to stick the barrel out and fired a few warning shots in the direction of the men. They freaked out. They jumped back in their vehicle and sped away, reversing all the way down the lane, careful not to show their license plates. To this day, I have no idea what those guys were planning. Maybe they just wanted to rob us. But the idea of people creeping onto our yard with their headlights off, shutting off the power, it's unsettling. Either way, I'm extremely grateful for our sweet dog Maggie and my badass mom for keeping us safe that night. It's been 21 years since that happened. At the time of my own experience, it was 2 months after Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. I was living with my uncle and aunt on their farm, which sits on top of a mountain that's part of El Yunque. El Yunque is a mountain range and a national preserve, and there are rumors that the government uses parts of it as a secret lab. You could think of it as the Area 51 of Puerto Rico. My uncle has told me several times to be careful if I go outside at night, warning me that I could get lost or even attacked by a group of wild hogs. Usually, I don't go out at night because I don't have a reason to. But one night, I was with my cousin Miguel. Just to be clear, I was 17 at the time and Miguel was 23. We were just joking around when suddenly a loud screech pierced the night. It was the kind of scream that an animal in terrible pain would make. I asked Miguel if he knew what the hell that noise could be, but he didn't answer. I asked again, still no response. Finally, he just told me to grab my crossbow and meet him in front of the house. Our first stop was the cows. All of them seemed okay, but they were oddly huddled together in one corner. That struck me as strange, but we brushed it off and moved on. Next, we checked the pigs. Each pig was kept in a small cage about 15 square feet, so we had to check each one individually. They all looked scared, wide-eyed and tense. When we got to the last cage, Colonel's cage, I immediately noticed it was empty. Colonel was supposed to be my uncle's fattest pig, and when we got home earlier, he had been there. We searched around for remains or any sign of him, but all we found was some blood smeared in the mud. Before we could process what was happening, another screech sounded nearby. This time, it was even closer. We ran outside, trying to spot a huge pig that might have escaped, but we found nothing. Deciding to cover more ground, we split up. I took a trail lined with thick trees on both sides. As I walked, I started hearing heavy footsteps about 20 feet ahead of me. I kept moving toward the noise, flashlight in hand. What I saw next was the ugliest, most horrifying thing I have ever seen. Red eyes glowed in the dark. I flashed my light at the source, and there it was, a black, humanoid canine creature. Its skin was rough and hairless, its face resembling a bat's but with giant teeth far larger than its own face. At that moment, I realized I was looking at the chupacabra. Luckily, it hadn't noticed me. It was busy eating Colonel alive. I quietly backed away and hid behind a fallen tree. I was in tears, forced to watch as the creature devoured Colonel. Then I made a decision. I had to kill it. I aimed my crossbow and fired. The bolt hit its ribs. It screamed, shrieking like nothing I've ever heard, and ran down the mountain. I called Miguel and told him to come to where I was. We needed to try to bring back Colonel, or at least recover the body. We decided to do it the next day. When Miguel asked about the screaming, I told him it was just the pig suffering. I knew he might want to go after the creature himself. We started heading back to get some sleep, but I couldn't sleep. That horrible image of the chupacabra eating Colonel played over and over in my mind. The next morning, Miguel and I went back to the spot to retrieve Colonel's carcass. The body was mostly intact, except it was drained of blood and had one small hole on its side. Miguel started laughing, which confused me. I asked what was so funny. He told me he thought the chupacabra was just a rumor, a story about a creature that snatched Colonel. He was skeptical until I told him I'd seen it and shot it in the ribs. Miguel said my uncle had once shot the chupacabra in the face with a shotgun and left it for dead. Apparently, it survived. After that night, I vowed never to step foot in the forest without a weapon. It was late August or early September of 2012 when I was living in a farmhouse in northwestern Pennsylvania, about an hour and a half from the New York state line. The farm had been owned by an Amish family before they moved to New York. I was familiar with the UFO phenomenon. My late grandfather claimed to have seen UFOs many times, and he was a semi-truck driver, so he traveled all over. My house was at the top of a big hill that stretched down to the road about 30 yards to our driveway. We had neighbors, a farm about 100 yards to the left, and some pictures further up the hill. Winter was approaching, so we were preparing to stock up on firewood. The pasture to the right was overgrown, so at 16 years old I had to use the brush hog tractor to mow down large weeds and small trees. For those who don't know, a brush hog is a heavy-duty mower designed for rough terrain. I was finishing up the last pass on the path about 600 yards to the woods where we would cut trees to bring back for firewood. As I drove up the hill on the tractor, I looked up at the sky. It was dusk and the clouds were glowing with the last light of the day. Suddenly, about 300 yards away, just above the tree line, two UFOs appeared. One came first, then the other followed as if chasing the first. They seemed to warp into that location and then disappeared almost instantly. The second shot to my left, moving faster than anything I'd ever seen. They gleamed in the setting sun's light, shiny with a dome on top. I was so shocked, I stopped the tractor and ran down to the house where my brother and father were. I was the only one home. My mother worked nights as a CNA and my brother was staying with his father for the summer. After seeing those UFOs, I became increasingly paranoid, especially at night. I felt like I was being watched. One night, my younger brother suddenly ran into our bedroom, waking me up. He was out of breath and scared, telling me he'd seen a face in the living room window, and not just any face. He said it was an alien face. Being the older brother, I felt like I had to be brave, so I jumped out of bed and headed downstairs to the porch. I opened the door and looked out, but I saw nothing. Still, an icy chill ran down my spine, and I felt like 100 eyes were piercing right through me. We both almost lost it when our indoor-outdoor cat suddenly jumped from the ground up onto the porch. We told ourselves it was just the cat he'd seen, but deep down, I know we both still feel like it was something else. Something him. Has anyone around northwestern Pennsylvania ever seen or felt anything like this? I remember that night so clearly, I know I didn't imagine it. I was terrified when I saw those UFOs too. My grandfather used to talk about UFOs, and that's where my interest in all of this started. I love your story about your grandma's farm too. That's like classic childhood adventure mixed with mystery. Here's a smoother version of that part, too. My grandma lived on a huge farm when I was a kid. I loved staying with her because, like any kid, I loved animals and the freedom of a farm. She owned a lot of land, and my brother and I were allowed to roam anywhere on the property as long as we stayed there and got back before dark. One day, curiosity got the better of us and we decided to follow a creek all the way to where it ended. Before we knew it, we had crossed the fence and left Grandma's property. Soon, we stumbled on an old, rundown cabin. For some reason, we decided to go inside. What we found was so strange. From the outside, the cabin looked barely standing, old and falling apart. But inside, it was like a family lived there recently. There were dishes on the table as if they'd just eaten spaghetti. The beds were made perfectly, furniture old but well cared for. The floor and wallpaper were in good shape. There wasn't a speck of dust or cobwebs. No damp or musty smell. It was warm, like someone had left in a hurry, but not long ago. We ran back to Grandma's house, excited to tell her what we'd found. She gave us a good scolding for leaving the property, but then she wanted to see the cabin for herself. The closest neighbor was nowhere near where we described. So, the three of us set off to find the cabin again. We followed the creek, crossed the fence, and went all the way down. But this time, there was nothing. No cabin. Just empty woods, like it had vanished into thin air. We searched for an hour, but it was gone. Grandma was mad we left the property, but she never doubted what we said. Looking back, I realize a lot of weird things happened on that farm. The supernatural seemed drawn to my grandma and my brother. They had many paranormal experiences, some I even witnessed. But most of the strange things just weren't happening to me. I grew up on a small farm surrounded by forest, in a tiny town nestled just below a larger city in Appalachia. The first strange encounter with this entity happened when I was between 8 and 10 years old. So maybe 10 or 13 years ago. It was evening, the sky darkening but still light enough to see outside. I was in my bedroom listening to music and playing. My window was open, and I noticed my dad walking past it with a stone-cold face. At first, I thought about saying hello, but I held back. Later, I told my mom that I saw my dad walk past the window. That's when things got weird. She told me my dad was actually at home and not outside at all. She also reminded me that my window was way too high for me to have seen anyone walking by. My mom suggested it was probably a bear, since we had a lot of hunting dogs that would often freak out over nothing. But that night, the dogs weren't even upset. I've told this story to my significant other and friends before, and when I was talking about strange moments, my significant other mentioned something similar they'd seen. When they visited my dad's place, they saw a very tall figure walking past a large kitchen window. They didn't catch many details but remembered the unsettling feeling it gave them. They meant to tell me earlier but forgot. Since hearing that, I've been researching what it might be. Honestly, I've just felt creeped out at the thought of going back to my dad's place. The smell was bad enough to make my eyes water. I started walking around, searching for the source of the awful smell. That's when I entered a room lit by 3 tea-light candles. Inside, I saw an 8-foot-tall creature, half human, half dog. The stench of death surrounded it. I immediately turned to run. But behind me, I heard the creature screeching my name. The sound was terrifying. I tried running again, but my dog Freddy wouldn't move. The creature lunged toward us. Freddy jumped on it and tried to latch onto its chest. The creature threw Freddy at me. Freddy got up and ran with me right behind him. I could still hear the creature screeching my name as we ran all the way home. When I slammed the door shut, the screams suddenly stopped. Examining my brave Freddy, I noticed 3 claw marks on his chest. I took him to the vet, but by morning they had to euthanize him. Black mold had started growing inside his wounds. Yes, black mold. We cremated Freddy and took his ashes to his favorite lake. 19 years later, I opened my window and heard those terrifying screeches again. The next morning, I found 3 claw marks across my front door. Now, I'm really not sure what to do. Thankfully, I haven't heard the screeches or seen any more scratches since then. I live in Lenworth, Kansas, and my story starts like this. I've been watching creepypasta videos for 2 or 3 weeks, caught up in a skinwalker kick. Which makes sense since my mother is Native American and my siblings and I have Native American blood too. One evening, I was driving my brother to work, making a turn down a road shortly after sunset. In the distance, I saw an outline in the woods. I didn't focus much and just brushed it off. Later, when I needed to pick my brother up, I took the same road again. Everything was calm until I noticed the outline again, this time more dog-like in shape. When we got about 300 yards from it, I identified it as a coyote. I started feeling a shakiness, like the nervous energy you get when hunting and the prey is within killing sight. At about 100 yards, the coyote came out, tail tucked between its legs, trotting toward us. About 40 or 50 yards away, something felt incredibly off. Its eyes shone as if it were daylight, completely black. As we moved past it, the creature just stood there, staring at us with this weird, menacing look. It was like it was looking inside us. I was about 100 yards past the creature when I stopped. It was still there, staring. I pulled a U-turn, and the creature trotted off in the opposite direction, still staring as if it wanted us to follow. We drove to a dead-end street with another patch of woods. We were about to follow the creature when it vanished. I was going to get out and check, but my brother, who had a terrible feeling, told me not to. We left quickly. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was messing with us. Maybe it had something sinister in mind. I'll likely never know. I'm a maintenance technician for a residential property in Colorado and also Native American. I live in a very urban area, but near some woods. Part of my job is handling emergency calls after hours. The first few nights were quiet, until one night at around 2:30 a.m., I got an emergency call about a leaking hot water heater. I live on the property, so I got there quickly. The heater needed replacing, so I walked to the shed where we keep spare parts. Suddenly, I saw this huge dog-like creature glaring at me from 30 feet away. Its eyes were bright yellow. As I loaded the heater onto a dolly, I noticed the dog looked disfigured. It was about 20 feet from me and started making noises I'd never heard before. I got nervous but kept working. Then I heard the sound of hoofbeats on the road behind me. When I looked back, the creature had hooves instead of feet. I freaked out, dropped the heater, and fled into a vacant unit. I locked all the doors and windows, pulled out my knife and flashlight, and took a tactical position. For 2 minutes, I listened quietly. Then I heard hoofbeats outside the window. Suddenly, there was tapping on the window, growing louder and louder. Then, the temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath inside the unit even though I had set the heat to 68 degrees. I noticed a patio door leading to the main road. I opened it and ran as fast as I could. I could hear the hooves gaining on me. This thing made horrible noises, trying to get me. I was thinking hard about where to run, somewhere safe. I decided to try for the maintenance office, hoping to find tools to defend myself. I didn't make it. I ran into a squad car responding to a noise complaint. The officer jumped out and asked if I was okay. I was out of breath. From the woods, we heard a blood-curdling scream. The cop called in backup. I told her everything. She looked at me like I was crazy. But when I showed her the deep hoof prints in the dirt outside the unit, her mouth dropped. 6 or more squad cars searched the woods but found nothing. Still, every now and then when I'm working or smoking outside, I get the feeling I'm being watched. And the hair on the back of my neck stands up.